Hello, welcome to Talking Europe on France 24. Our guest today is from one of the European Union's founding member states, one of its largest, and a country that's currently in a certain amount of political limbo after a rather extraordinary election result earlier in March. I am, of course, talking about Italy. Sandro Gozi is Europe Minister, a member of Matteo Renzi's Democratic Party, the centre-left party that was pushed into second position by the anti-establishment political newcomers of the Five Star Movement. Well, what's more, the DP was only a hair's breadth ahead of the right-wing eurosceptic Lega party. Thanks very much, Sandro Gozi, for being with us. We are, of course, meeting on the sidelines of the European Council summit in Brussels. So a major topic here has been Russia. Let's start there. The UK's Theresa May has notched up a diplomatic win by getting the entire EU to state officially that they do believe it's highly likely Moscow is behind a chemical attack on British soil against a former Russian spy. Now, the EU ambassador to Russia is being recalled. Your country, Italy, had been seen as one of the countries potentially reluctant to join in with this kind of a strong statement. What's your assessment of these decisions?
Well, we were not reluctant at all. We thought that it was important to show solidarity to Britain, and we have done so ahead of the summit, and we have done so during the summit. And we said only that a bold reaction must be also effective, and I think that to be effective, it must be based on strong evidences, and this is, I think, was the case, and also to start a process which can also be hardened, but it was very important, the decision, symbolic and political decision, to ask the EU ambassador to return to Brussels from Moscow.
Now, Theresa May, when she arrived, talked about a pattern of Russian aggression against Europe and its near neighbours. Do you see threats against Italy from Russia?
No, I don't see threat from the Russian Federation to Italy. There is only one point which is highly political and which I've said very openly also to the Russian representative in Rome. And that I do believe that the strategy of the main political parties in Russia to foster links, even to sign formal agreement with anti-European extremist movements around Europe, like they did with the Lega in Italy last year, it is a wrong strategy. I do not believe that it is a very long-sighted approach, and I do not believe that a weaker European Union is really in the interest of the Russian Federation, as someone in Moscow thinks to be. On the contrary, I think that where the two neighbors are much more confident in themselves, the dialogue, even if this difficult moment, would be much easier. So this is, in my view, it is a fundamental mistake which the Russians are doing, and it doesn't concern only Italy, it concerns other also big countries.
Well, the European Union does have sanctions in place against Russia. They've been there since 2014. They're due to be voted on again in July when they come up for renewal. Will Italy be supporting their renewal? Well,
let's draw a distinction. The sanctions are not related to the recent events. We have to explain that the sanctions are related to the need to implement the Minsk agreement, and the evaluation, the assessment of the sanction, whether to confirm, to renew them, depend also on the implementation of the Minsk agreement, which is not satisfactory at all. This is well below our expectations. In my view, it's below our expectations not only because of the Russian side, but also the Ukrainian side. And we always say that it cannot be automatic, the renewal of the sanction, but it must be preceded by a political assessment of the situation. And we'll see, I cannot compete for the government in July because I don't know whether the current government in Rome will be there in July. It will depend also on the decision of the new government, on the new parliament. I have to say that the two major anti-European parties which won the election, on one side the Five Star Movement, on the other one the Lega of Salvini, has always shown a very open attitude towards Russia. They've always been very critical of our decision to approve the sanctions, because I would like to remind you that Italy has always voted in favor of the sanctions.
Some have even talked about the more populist anti-establishment parties in Italy getting support from Russia, even talking about election meddling. Would you go that far? I
don't have any element to talk about election meddling. I have an element which is legitimate. Last year, the party which was the major supporter of Putin struck a formal deal, a formal agreement with the Lega of Salvini. And that's many members of the Lega were very proud in our parliament about this agreement. I repeat, it is a legitimate agreement. In my view, it is a wrong strategy from Moscow.
All right, let's talk about the election itself then. The way the results went, there is no clear path to a government being formed currently. How long might we have to wait until we get one?
Listen, it depends on the consultations, which will start in the very next days. It is clear that it is a parliamentary process run mainly by the President of the Republic. And I think that, of course, the President of the Republic will have to start with the coalition, so the extreme right coalition, which won the elections, or by the first parliamentary group, which is the Five Star Movement. We'll see. I think that in April there will be consultations. In general, in Italy, it takes between 6 and 8 weeks to form a government. So we'll see whether by May a deal can be done.
Now, as I mentioned, we saw these two anti-establishment populist parties scoring very well in the election. Yeah. Can we read this as a win for populism, as a failure of the traditional centre, perhaps a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. It is clear that the anti-European extremism Le Pen style of Salvini was very successful. They have been smuggling politics of fear all around the country, and they have been very successful with their campaign, xenophobic campaign, obsession about the threat of the invasion of migrants.
Well, they would say they were reflecting ordinary people's fears.
I do believe that they were reflecting ordinary people's fear, but the perception is not the reality. Of course, we have failed to persuade that we were taking back control over migration, and the Five Star Movement played the card of social rage and social dissatisfaction, and certainly, I mean, they emerge as a winner. In my view, they do not have a program that can be implemented. I do believe that they would fail if they are in government, but I think that it is totally legitimate that they try to set up a government and they try to rule the country.
All right, well, let's take a closer look at one particular region of Italy now, where there was quite a large swing from the traditional left to the populist parties. It's actually your home region, yeah. I understand, Emilia-Romagna. Yeah. This report from France 24 correspondent Natalia Mendoza.
Emilia-Romagna is one of the historic bastions of the left in Italy. And yet, this northern region swung dramatically to the right during the last elections. In Piacenza, the centre-left Democratic Party, who've been in power for the last 5 years, suffered their worst defeat in the region.
They didn't protect the workers. They supported the employers and not the employees. And so the workers rebelled. That's it.
Romano is retired. All his life he voted to the left, but this time he gave his vote to the extreme right-wing League.
I've always been left-wing, but they let me down, and so I changed. Because they allowed in too many foreigners, and because they didn't do anything for people like us, the elderly.
Here, at the last elections, less than 1 in 3 voters voted left-wing, an unprecedented result. This law student also chose to support the League, the only party in her mind capable of providing job security for the younger generation.
What I liked about Salvini's politics was his proposal to do away with the culture of internships. So we can stop living like this until the age of 35, working only on short-term contracts.
The day after the elections, the local members of the Democratic Party look morose and begin the process of mea culpa.
We didn't manage to give the right answers, and we've not been understood. It's our own fault, because we didn't make ourselves clear.
We have to completely rebuild the left, like a football team that has been knocked out of the Premier League and that has to be reworked from A to Z.
Here, everyone agrees that regaining the confidence of the left-wing voters will not be an easy task.
There we go, some somewhat stinging accusations from some of the voters that we heard for there, young and old, saying, for example, the parties traditionally in the centre didn't do anything for ordinary people like them. I know there has been recovery in Italy's economy, but perhaps ordinary people aren't feeling it on their level.
Yes, of course, the growth is back in Italy, but it hasn't spread equally around the country. First of all, there is a strong divide between North and South, which is economic and has become political, with the South, which gave a big confidence, a strong confidence to the Five Star Movement. And certainly we have done too late, we have done new social policies, but this was too little too late. I do believe that the reform of the labour market was a very important reform, which goes in favour of a young generation, but this wasn't perceived like that, and certainly it takes always time between a reform and the effect perceived by the people. So this is one of the reasons why the young people are so worried about, and they are rightly worried about the fact that they don't want to remain in a precarious position. And this is certainly one strong element. We have been very effective in moving ahead with the civil rights agenda, but we have left aside in the first phase what is the utmost importance, the policy to fight against social inequalities, which are growing. And in Emilia-Romagna, there is this perception of being invaded by migrants, which I repeat, it is not supported by the figure, but certainly in the peak of the migratory crisis, the thousands and thousands of migrants which arrived on the Italian coast, which were spread around the country, which were moved, notably the asylum seekers, in the most effective regions, such as Emilia-Romagna, together combined with the absence of European Union action and with the total absence of European solidarity, in my region has certainly provoked this sentiment of deep dissatisfaction, invasion, and that was a very fertile ground for the discourse and the proposal of the Lega of Matteo Salvini. And this is, in my view, the main reasons of their success.
Well, the migration crisis has certainly been at the heart of political debate in Italy. There have even been violent racist incidents, fatal shooting in Macerata, for example, that have shocked many people. Do you believe that Europe is going to get to grips with the migration crisis? The numbers have stabilised, but that's not to say that they're not going to pick up again at any point in the future. And as I see it, there's no coherent European migration policy.
The number have stabilized, but let's not get any illusion. Europe must develop a truly common migratory policy. In these last weeks, apart from formal, ritual solidarity discourse about what has happened in Italy, and what happened in Italy, the political turmoil, is due mainly, not only, but mainly to the migratory crisis, has not followed by any concrete new proposal. And until the European Union doesn't develop a truly effective common migration policy, I think that migration is going to be an open issue and a very thorny issue, notably in Italy, but not only in Italy, but a little bit around Europe.
I know that before the election you said if any EU member state fails to show solidarity on migration, not taking in migrants, as several have refused to do, they should lose EU funding. It's a very strong stance. Could risk causing splits within the European family, though?
The split has already happened on the principle of solidarity, on rule of law, on the fundamental values. And Italy was the first in 2016 to say that in the next budget of the European Union, from 2020 onwards, we must introduce new conditions. If you do not comply with your duties in terms of solidarity, in terms of rule of law, in terms of fundamental rights, in terms of respect of asylum rights, you cannot get EU funds. And Italy has been followed by Germany, has been followed by France. There was an opening in the proposal of the European Commissioner Oettinger, followed by Sweden. So what we said in 2016 now is pleaded by many governments. You cannot be pro-European when you get a billion of EU funds and become nationalistic when you have to receive some asylum seekers from Italy and Greece.
Some see the rise of populism in Italy as really part of a European trend and therefore a European problem. Do you believe, as a member of one of the traditional parties, that you just need to change your way of doing things? Yeah. The Five Star Movement have been so good at reaching out to ordinary people.
First of all, I don't find myself in your expression of being from a traditional party, as the Democratic Party was founded 10 years ago to go well beyond the traditional parties. This certainly is not to say that we haven't failed. We have failed in this election, and I think we have to build up new European alliances based on strong pro-European choices, reformist programs, and I think that this is the only way, as Europe is a new fundamental cleavages, well beyond the left and right cleavages, the only way to be effective in the next European election in 2019, and this is why we look with a great interest to the initiative of En Marche Europe proposed by Emmanuel Macron. I think that Socialists, Green, Liberal Democrats, En Marche, all the European forces should join in fighting the fight against extremism in Europe next year.
All right, an interesting look to the future then. Thank you very much for your time. Sandro Gozi, European Affairs Minister of Italy. Thank you as well for watching. We'll see you again very soon for more European news on France 24.